A very good morning to all of you. And I have also decided to do a recording of this conversation so that due to Zoom failures or something or the other, you wouldn't miss out on the whole lecture. And hopefully it'll come out well. I should be able to join you all. And if I don't, then this is with my best wishes to all of you at the National Institute of Social Development, Sri Lanka. I have many years of experience and working relationship with several of the director generals, directors, social work educators of NIST. Coming to Sri Lanka has always been a great pleasure. Working with Sri Lankans has always been a great pleasure. And wish you luck with everything that you do. And my best wishes are always with you in terms of wanting to develop the School of Social Work into and affiliate itself into a university. At this outset, I not only wish to congratulate all of you for your wonderful initiative of doing this international conference, but also to let you know it's a great honor for me um, from it, from the same South Asian culture um, to be in a position to present to you some views on resiliency development after economic meltdowns, and of course, almost after the pandemic. And for this, I will use a few slides and hopefully I will generate some discussion after I finish my lecture. Right. I think the reason why you guys have decided to go online is to start attracting more people towards this kind of communication and this sort of opportunity for more people within your own country to see, and also possibly to attract the attention of others who will be able to work through the some of these slides and understand the conceptualization that we have got here. Now, the intention of showing a few photographs from Sri Lanka is not deliberate. It is just to hone back a point of view that we have just recently gone through all of this. My earnings aren't enough to live off now. A cup of tea is 100 rupees. So if I earn 2,000 rupees a day, then almost all of that is spent on feeding my family. This is one of those Sri Lankan photographs with this writing, which we found in the Western press. Protests we have seen more recently, and protests. Constantly we've been seeing this. More importantly, we have also seen the fuel strikes, the way fuel was handled, the way, of course, the governments have changed and various other things have happened. But unfortunately, the whole thing during pandemic and post-pandemic has all, looks to us as if there has been a deliberate plan somewhere that has been utilized in such a way to crush all of us. God forbid. I hope nobody ever thought that's the way they wanted to, do it to any particular country. But certainly some of us have, took the brunt, and that is the reason why we need to really be cautious and build ourselves out. At the outset, I must also tell you, I'm not an economist. I'm not a political scientist. I'm not even a sociologist. I'm a humble social worker, an educator in social work. Yes, I do have probably a great observational sense. And being a grounded theory practitioner, I tend to see between the slides and between the photographs in order to interpret what probably is the right way and right approach for all of us. Ravichandra Pereira's husband, Richard, is one of the least 7 people who have died in line while waiting for fuel. He went to the petrol shed to pump petrol We waited there for 1 hour in the hot sun. Once he pumped petrol, he crossed the road and fell off the road. He was dead by the time he got to the hospital. And that's his wife. What does that show to us? It shows shortages. I only took one shortage, an economic shortage, fuel shortage. The meltdown had many, many things. Meltdown meant to the government and to the staff a whole lot of people being retrenched, a whole lot of people being asked to go away, do whatever they can, go wherever they could, whichever country they could if they wanted to, go on loss of pay, or go without a scholarship and go and study as well. In the whole process, we need to understand who are the people who get affected. And we are social workers. Certainly, the elderly and the aged, the frail-aged, are also the ones who get affected. We have seen during pandemic and post-pandemic, classes being held by the candlelight with no paper for students to write on. I think it is said somewhere, when economy hangs by the thread, even political stability crumbles. That's exactly what happened in Sri Lanka and also in other parts of the world. So, what is it that we need to do? As the teacher sounds an eagle there, we all need to get together and get a strategy for the future of the country and our children and develop the country as soon as possible. With that as my hope, this is a limited amount of theory-based, some practical-oriented suggestions for all of us to work through. There's an indication I don't have many slides, there are 20 slides. So that means I'll go fast and you would have a reasonable amount of understanding by the end of my presentation. One of the things that I'm going to do here is basically unpack the resilience that we require. What is resilience in a way? Resilience is seen as an expression of mutual generosity. I take care of you, you take care of me. And this happens in the community, this happens in the groups, this happens in the families. Maybe it does happen between countries too. But there is sometimes goodwill, political will, something behind, various other things, strategies, foreign aid with economic sanctions after, or something or the other could also happen. A mutual generosity is unconditional generosity. It's also used at one point of time as a remarkable heroism in the face of adversity and crisis. I haven't changed this definition since 2013. It's 2010. Myself and a colleague of mine made this up. Its resilience, historically, a public resource for solace is what we ask. Is that something that you can always keep digging from the well? A reservoir. Do you have to pump water into the reservoir so that you can actually get it out? Would the reservoirs don't dry up? Isn't there a drought? Isn't there a dry season? This is what you need to concentrate about. So how does this happen? There's always been a thought that crisis generates innovation. Crisis generates creativity. Crisis generates innovation, creativity, and opportunity. Exposure to adversity and resultant positive adjustments are the main things that you look forward to. What do they do? They provide an opportunity and a capacity. And it is through that we tried to show how we can build ourselves. So what's the community consisting of? I know that the acting director general at this point of time is an anthropologist. He will very much understand there are some primordial recognitions that we need to work with that are essentially associated with the communities. One of them, I would call it the coping reserve. Coping reserve is one of those terms that I intend using, which talks in terms of the ability or within the community to continue with the hardship, prolonged hardship, for a little longer than what they otherwise deserve to be. There's also a building reserve. As you prolong, there's also somebody else who says, could be a day more. We might need this. It is similar to the strategy when guests come and your grandmother would dilute a cup of buttermilk to make it 4 and give it and share it with everybody else. If it is only one guest, she would give the entire cup of yogurt or curds. But if it is 4 or 5 people who come, she would ingeniously add a little bit of salt, a little bit of water, make it palatable, and give it to everybody else. That motherliness, that adaptation, that ability within the community to share without questioning is what is called the mutual generosity. This is also related to something else at the psychodynamic level. We have also something called the inner strength. And the inner strength is always associated with something that is, you draw from within, and you draw from within in such a way that it unfolds itself, multiplies when it sees somebody else also is drawing from within, and you join together. There are beautiful inspirational songs that we use when we are on our way marching forward in a resilient society. What are the other elements that we need to know? We all know, in fact, sometimes I feel, do I need to teach this? Do I need to talk about this? But then I feel we need to remind ourselves, not so much as social scientists, social workers, professors, and everybody else, as just human beings who need to still understand we have network factors such as families, friends, neighbors. We have a whole lot of skills, innate temperamental skills, abilities and skills, communication, ability to problem solve, everything. When you start walking on the road or even in the garden, when you see an ant line going across, the sound of your slippers alerts the ant. It stands still for a second. It thinks you could be predator. It thinks you could stamp her. It chooses a pathway. It could go left, it could go right, it could go faster. Watch. Increase your observations. You would find there is a solution that from ants, from bees, from smaller animals, we can figure out what is the way in which they find their critical responses during crises. It's important to see how they even communicate very quickly that there is a crisis, how they quickly communicate and do their problem solving. The primordial connection that I talked about in the earlier slide is that slide that you need to focus on. Primordial connection is the connection that you need to focus on. That will now take us to an existential supports that we have, an existential way of looking at things that we can talk about. The meaning, the values that we have in our society. The good thing about Sri Lanka, There's religion in abundance. There's Buddhism, certain amount of Christianity, Hinduism, some aspects of Islam, some amount of Islam, but certainly very few people without a religion. As a result, there's values and faith constantly there to be supported. In rebuilding ourselves, there are things that we learn from other cultures. We also learn as a result of our migrations, going around, trying to understand from each other. So Sri Lanka is also one of those countries, which is in its own way, multicultural, 4 or 5 cultures that are around through which we have an opportunity to build our relationships. So how do you nurture resilience? I'll come to the community and community empowerment at some point of time, but I want to get through these basics first. Sociologically, integrative assimilation. Cultures have never been abandoned. Cultures have never been hidden. They come with you. They're ingrained. They're familial. They're community-centered. At times, you build on that very culture. At times, you acculture yourself. You add on to it. But at the same time, you have respective origins, as I would call it, recognizes when a particular culture is under threat. When somebody is under threat, just like the ant which withdraws itself at the sound of your feet, at the sound of your slipper or your shoe, the same way, the cultures become vulnerable. They, in fact, start coming closer together. That vulnerability produces energy, crisis. That vulnerability also produces an opportunity. Let's look at that at a deeper level at a later stage. Existential support, I talked about that before. And let's see how we would probably need to look at this one. It's a very important slide, I think. Why culture matters. I know they are very small diagrams, but at some point of time, I'll get you this sheet of paper. Culture is what makes communication possible. Consequently, culture is the pattern of thinking and habits and experiences that human beings share that make it possible to understand each other. And that's, of course, a big translation of a Norwegian scientist. So what am I seeing? I'm going to see culture as an operating reserve. There's a lot that's coming against our culture. If there are economists in this audience who fancifully like World Economic Forum and the literature that might come from there, or those of them who support certain theories that are coming up, I must ask you that I would probably be differing from you to a large extent, because I still believe our cultures are probably not suited to the Western way of economic development that we want to infuse into our countries. True, a lot of our organic way of doing things have been buggered. Even when we wish to introduce them now in a buggered soil, we have had resistance. Sri Lanka is a given example of where, after a long time, some experiments have been redone. It isn't that the government was not listening into. Government was listening into and was probably allowing too. But circumstances are made in such a way that there is such a competition, there is such an amount of volatility there. It is made to receive reduced profits, more inputs, and as a result, made unviable and declared, of course, that now it doesn't work for us. We got to go in a different way. So while there is cultural resistance, that cultural resistance cannot withstand the Western infusion and sometimes the Western invasion. I still call South Asian societies quite indigenous in their own way. And I want you to mark that, preserve that, and hang on to that, because that is one which will ultimately make us feel proud, not only from a cultural perspective, but even economically. It is the only thing through which we could rise to where we want to rise. The culture gives warning signals when somebody invades us. The culture gives us the warning signals with the underlying risk when somebody is trying to actually massacre the culture. You know, the terminology is like a rape of a culture. Sounds very bad, but that's exactly what happens when an invasive culture comes and dominates and takes refuge in our existing culture and then drives us out into something totally different. Indigenous arguments, hanging on to indigenous ways, may be seen by some people as patriotic, but by others as something not very progressive. It's a matter of you. It's not just only patriotic, it is probably also healthy. It is also possibly the only way by which somebody could survive, not only survive, thrive, flourish with pride. So it not only provides us capital, and it also provides us forces that are beyond our control because they come from within. Our language has changed, ways of things have changed, the dress has changed, the codes have changed. So it's moved to a situation where a whole lot of other changes have to be simply accepted. And this is one of the reasons why the previous wisdom that we have has been over time becoming a dissolving wisdom. Instead of evolving, revolving, and continuously honing us back into it, there is a cry, whether it is in Nepal, or whether it is in India, or whether it is in Sri Lanka. People call the old thing, the old wonderful things of the past are decaying, dying. We let them die. That's a bad thing. So you got to think in terms of heritage. It's not a heritage protected area for which you want a UNICEF label. In fact, I don't even believe in those UNICEF labels. You need to have your own label to protect the heritage. Who is UNICEF to tell us that? Why should they protect us? Why do we need 20 cents from somebody to protect our own heritage? Where is national pride? That is a question. That is a question that will take you even into economic and social developmental arena. Respecting authoritatively our own culture, our own wisdom is probably the only way we can actually build ourselves over a period of time. I will now look quickly at certain things. One of them is community resilience. My definition of community resilience is its ability to construct from within. That means it has to come from within. It encounters or initiates major change. It achieves effective outcomes with minimal waste of time because it is well thought over. When a community is made up of resilient individuals, individuals who can stand who will be positioned to adapt quickly, change quickly, effectively. A collection of such resilient people is what becomes important. But again, that does not guarantee that a community as a whole becomes resilient. One sparrow does not make a summer. A collection of sparrows also does not make a summer because they run away, because they are running somewhere. But how a community as a whole will be able to use that group, respond well to the challenges in the environment, that becomes a system element, which means there's a need for community organizer, there is a need for social worker, and therefore a need for the 22, 25-year-old NISD to constantly press and impress upon the government to increase social workers, to increase community development workers, and continue on its own pathway. We help the government. We also sometimes subversively assist the government in order to see the democracy and human rights orientation of the governmental programs is actually brought into that particular area. Social worker is not an enemy of the society. Social worker is one who deals with the dysfunctioning that has arisen in the given social system. He tries to adjust the system. He works with the money that the government and the philanthropy gives. If it is not coming through, he might agitate the community to ask for more. That doesn't mean he is the enemy of the government or only the friend of the community. To brand a social worker, you're a leftist, you're a rightist, you're a centrist, is ridiculous. To brand a social worker as a disruptor is a good thing to do. If there is no disruption, there is no change. All social workers are not interested in politics. All social workers are not interested in becoming politicians. But all social work is political. Whether it is politician or economist, you need to have a good communicator, via media between you and the society. What more can you get other than a social worker? The best that can be is to have a social worker as a medium in between. Another lecture, another time, to another audience. But to us, be proud, do what you need to do, and do it well. So you need to be involved, you need to increase your ability, and you need to become a system. Now, very simple. I don't need to go through this as if as a student kind of a thing. But then sometimes the very basic student things is something that we need to talk about even in great audiences. Systems theory. What's it about? That it is self-regulating, that it generates modes, that it generates the norms in our society, that it can produce holistic ways and means by which we can deal with the society, that it is interactional, it comes by conversations, and that it is relational or relationship building. If all of that is systems theory, hey, why aren't we using it? Build societies through the same mechanisms that have been given to us or be understood and given to us from a Western perspective. The other thing I want you to understand and understand quickly is our societies are not any more self-sacrificing and taking care of everybody else. Let's define self-interest. There must be self-interest. I and my family. Why not? I, my family and my neighbors. I, my family, my neighbors, my community. I, my family, my neighbors, my community, my country. That is the only way you will build it up. I can't see social work not talking that language. I can't see social work not taking up a language of patriotism. I can't see social work not singing the song of development. I would like to see all of that to happen. So loyalty to the community is critical. I can't exist without my community. My community is not WhatsApp community. It is not Instagram community. It is not Facebook community that Elon Musk or somebody else must be ruling. Those are all mechanisms for us to use. Use it. Use them well. I've got the other one on the endogenous opportunities that the communities provide for us to build our resilience back, our economics back, our pandemics thrown away. With discretion and with thinking, you can easily see who won the pandemic. Third world, with limited resources, with limited masks, with limited vaccines. Africa, with possibly no vaccines. Sri Lanka, with limited resources. India, with limited resources, have done much better than the Western world during the pandemic. Theories are there, conspiracy theories and other theories. I don't want to go there. But certainly, we have made it okay. Given what we had, we seem to have done quite good. That is because of what? We had a local community. We had a local network. We took advantage of the community resources and strengths that we had. People were feeding. Government was feeding too. Where there was a paucity of government resources, people came forward to do it. A spectrum of community members went through and did what needed to be done. We created new collaborations. New community leaders were born. They were pandemic leaders. They were not there after that. They didn't become politicians. The crooked politicians remained, perhaps, sorry to use that word, but a certain amount of managerial ability and inventiveness of those politicians continues to make them remain there, and therefore some of us to make those comments that some of them are crooked. But what to do? Because we don't go there, you don't make a, you feel that you may not make a good politician, you don't go there. So therefore, he becomes a good politician or a bad politician, and we got to tolerate that or live with that. Developing trust and networks and social capital. Who did that? People in the pandemic. People looked after themselves. They formed their groups. They formed their specific duties. Limited conflict resolution. Because in the time of pandemic, there was very limited conflicts. There's no point asking if the government can't do it, what can you do? You go ahead and do it. Pandemic gave us a test when the governments failed. Pandemic gave us a test that nobody can be spared. Many, many politicians also passed away. Many, many other people passed away. It wasn't just the commoner who passed away, many other people did. So community's ability to tolerate, adapt to change is quite high. And that's the reason why today, economic crisis, even in Sri Lanka, well, of course, a lot of articles come up, some blame China for everything else. And some blame China for maybe true reasons. China probably is a new imperialist. Once upon a time, we had the West India Company and East India Company and the British. And British haven't apologized to us yet. I don't think they will ever. But then you have new imperialism. It's out there in Africa, it's out there in Sri Lanka. We don't know who we need to befriend. Our politicians befriend. And they say this dam is good, that building is good, that big bridge is good. We don't have people to buy tickets in our country, but we have huge airports. We don't have people wanting to take bus routes, but we've got air-conditioned buses to run. We suddenly decide petrol and diesel is to be out and we all have to go into electricity. We are solar great nations and we do use little solar on the government buildings. So there's a government for preaching and there's a government for, there is a people for practicing. Going back to the basics, using the community organization function, seeing every economist, sociologist, anthropologist, social scientist, historian, artist, everyone to be one that has to have a primordial connection with the community and the ability to work in the community is probably the only way by which we can resurrect, build our countries and our communities. Don't expect some messiah to come. Don't expect governments to turn. What's government? Government is us. We don't elect them because most educated alienate themselves and let some common people elect them. And those common people, they are not corrupt by themselves. There is a certain element of corruption that could possibly be one of the main reasons why some of our countries don't go up and don't live up to the expectations. Exogenous opportunities are presented. Creating community channels between government and agencies is one of our roles. I'm not asking you to sidestep and take a flag against the government and join the protests. I'm talking in terms of use the common sense. If there's a program, make that program go to the grassroots. If the program is short of going to the grassroots, get the grassroots to talk about it. Encourage them to give feedback to the politicians that it is more required. Whether it is rehabilitation of the people with disabilities, the community rehabilitation program that you have. Sri Lanka had a wonderful program many, many years ago. Worth looking at community rehabilitation of people with disabilities. Using local networks to gain access to external resources. True, we also need resources from outside. And lobbying on behalf of the community. These are some of the things that I would think that will move us from coping societies to that of resilient societies. And then we'll be moving on. I'll reiterate what I wanted to say, this possibly as an important slide. I want you all to recognize that there is a local context for economic interdependence, economic liberation, and also economic development. As community workers, as social workers, we need to share the community's future vision. In fact, assist them in building that vision. We also have to find our own place in the community. You can't be an alien urban person going to the rural community once in a while and wanting to vitalize that community. There must be a stakeholder relationship. You got to find some stakes in that. You got to understand how to work with inside power structure. There's always a power structure. Everybody has to work with the power structure. What does a power structure feed on? It feeds on power. What are you doing? You're not going to snatch the power. Tell the power structured oriented person, hey, you be the king. I'll only be your chief minister. I'll only be a number two. Encourage self-determination in any community that we talk about. Assist with collective replies. Is a nice terminology. Replies means ensuring that the questions that we ask have enormous amount of people who have answers to help out. Seeking constructive social transformation for all local communities will be an important issue. And the other thing, of course, as we always say, a critical reflection coming from within, participating in both action and reflection. I think with those few words, I want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to address you at short notice. And as I said, I'm very, very grateful to this opportunity, and I will always be there for the NISD for its cause in social work. Thank you.